TEFAP is the federal acronym, as we refer to it as, for the Emergency Food and Assistance Program. It's been around for about 25 years. It's a very important part of the safety net for addressing hunger and food insecurity in the United States. People often are unaware that it exists, but it is a most significant part of support for food pantries, food banks, food shelves, emergency feeding programs right across the country.
The TEFAP program is the backbone of the emergency food system in the state of Minnesota and around the country. These are the most nutritionally sound products that many food shelves will have on their shelves. This is a significant contribution from the federal budget to the poorest people in our country.
TEFAP came about, again, in the early 80s. If you remember, in the early 80s, there was a terrible recession in the U.S. So it was intended, I think, initially as a partial address to that. We had the food stamp program and other companion programs. The funding for the TEFAP program comes up in the Farm Bill, so-called, or the emergency, formerly the Agriculture Act of 2014. And the bulk of the funding is for food commodities. They're purchased by the USDA and then distributed across the country. Over the years, it has been basically supported. Last year, it was about $300 million nationally that is then distributed to states across the country based on their poverty, the incidence of poverty in those states.
So the model has changed over the years. In the early 1990s, the Department of Human Services gave funding to community action agencies across the state, and they received the food in distribution sites, and they only received it about quarterly, and it was really a mass distribution drop, and there were long lines of people, and it wasn't a very efficient way that we were conducting our business. So the model changed when the Department of Human Services granted 2 hunger solutions, and then they worked with food banks and food shelves, and the distribution model became much more spread across the state and was able to reach people where they needed it, and the lines disappeared and people were able to access food daily, if not monthly.
Once the state places its order for TEFAP foods, the food is transported from the producers to the 7 food banks. The food banks then transport the food directly to the food shelves and meal programs based on the number of people they served in the previous year. About 85% of the total TEFAP product goes to food shelves and the rest to meal programs. The food shelves then distribute it directly to those in need.
You know, last year in the U.S., 47 million people went to emergency food sites across the U.S. Many of them are unaware of the fact that a significant portion of the foods that were served to them or that they were able to pick up in a pantry, even though it doesn't have a USDA label on it, this program purchases foods that go into the emergency food system. Well, the most important thing for me about TEFAP is, at the end of the day, those foods that get to individuals across the country are received through voluntary organizations, often faith-based groups, food pantries, and others. If it had to go through a commercial system, there'd be far less food, or the program would be much more costly. So we get the advantage here of the leverage that the federal government brings to purchase food at a good price, bolstered then by all of the voluntary hours that are given in food pantries, food banks, organizations that really enhance the benefit for the consumer.
For more information, visit hungersolutions.org/TEFAP.